welcome. Welcome, how is it going? Hello. So, chat. Supreme Court has failed us. But first, let's say hi to everybody. Majestic Potato, first, welcome. Fruit Salad, hello. S&T K2C, very nice. Not the BAFTA, hello. Ferocious, hello. Oh yeah, sorry about the horrible noises that were happening. There is an echo that can happen that just kind of starts building slowly and then turns into just the horrible awfulness. And that's what was happening. It should be better now, though. But hello, welcome. Congratulations on surviving the intro, I guess. Surviving the starting soon. But go ahead and mark that one on the butt counter. Apologize for stealing S&T motive. I did not do anything. You know I don't have control over the gacha, right? It's a bot. It's a bot that runs. I'm not out here like dealing cards. I'm not card counting it. You couldn't tell if it was a glitch or noise metal. It was an echo that had been echoed many times over at that point. But it was just echoing music, so. Devil Rose, hello, welcome. Marlin 1895 SBL. Is that the short one? Is that the Jurassic Park one? I'm not sure. I run the bot, therefore all bot glitches are my fault. Just because the bot is running on my computer does not mean that I'm causing the glitches. Join count stream, become violently ill, definitely counts fault. It checks out. It checks out. The Calico Liberty 2. Congratulations. What? Don't yuck the Liberty 2. Can't believe this. You don't even know which one the Liberty 2 is. It's this one. This is the Liberty 2. If it's so great, why did they revise it? What? That is the revised one. Originally, it was the M900. You got the updated version. And the Liberty 3 is the pistol. Mao. 50 BMG has buff against poor people because of how expensive it is. So does 5.7. 5.7 and 50 BMG both have buffs against poor people. Mao or Kali? Hello, welcome. Mao. What is Mao? What does Mao mean? Are you making me like a curse in Tagalog or something? Any rare coins under my monitor? Yes. Is it this one? It is this one. You want a French franc? Currency that doesn't exist anymore? Twink hands. Twink hands. Wrong. I have long Slenderman fingers, not twink hands. I've got horror movie hands, not twink hands. Just making cat noises. Fair enough. Salad fingers. A little bit, yeah. A little bit. M1 Garens have buffs against Germans. I feel like most guns have buffs against Germans. Except maybe like the G3. Anything made by HK. M1 Garans have buffs against thumbs. Imagine being a German thumb. It's over. They released dopamine with the clink. The Garand ping is very good. I need to get a Garand because I don't have one. It just so I can ping it. Just so we can have unlimited Garand pings. Gotcha. Hello. Oh, you got you got a weird one. The Zank revolver. That's a good one. That's a good one for sure. Too bad I don't think it ever got past vaporware. The HK Cause? HK Cause is HK shotgun. Very weird boxy looking thing that I'm waiting for Turkey to reproduce so I can buy one. The Vaporware Bullpup revolver, that is exactly what it is. Which I kind of wish it hadn't stayed Vaporware because I don't think it would work very well, and I want to know how well it would work. For those, the Zank Bullpup revolver with the enclosed cylinder at the back. Weird, almost definitely not very functional revolver. Also just a bunch of vaporware. Deter your enemies from your lawn. I mean, yeah, you don't want enemies on your lawn for sure. They're gonna flatten out your nicely manicured grass. Have I gotten the folding shotgun? Which one? The folding shotgun? Like a break action? Like one of those break actions that folds all the way in half? Which folding shotgun are we talking about? The Turkish one? Wait. Are we talking about just like a break action that just folds all the way over? No, I don't have one of those. It's a tactical one. I do not. Do I have any Turkish shotguns? Yes, my over-under is Turkish. That's my only Turkish shotgun. You didn't catch the news? Are 80% dead again? Yes, that is what we were going to talk about. That was the whole stream for today.
Max Forgived just traded with 10 viewers.
Max Forgived. Max Forge VT. Welcome. Thank you for the raid. Welcome, raiders. Hello, raiders. I am the X Count. We do much gun stuff here, as you may be able to tell. What were you playing? Oh wait, I forgot I set it up so I can just read it out of the chat. I can tell what you were playing. Were you winning? Forging your way through history. It sounds like a lot of work. Got on a tangent about AC shadows and sunflower seeds. Oh, you mean the Assassin's Creed that's full of wokeness? Gay Assassin's Creed. I haven't played it. I can only echo what I've heard other people complaining about. I've not looked into shadows. But it's gay Assassin's Creed. That's what everyone's saying. And sunflower seeds. Sunflower seeds doesn't seem related to Assassin's Creed. The fact that Assassin's Creed Shadows has a black samurai who was actually real. Interesting. I don't know much samurai history. I do know that they were not this glorified class of people like they are in media, though. You lost interest in Assassin's Creed after Assassin's Creed 3. The only Assassin's Creed that I've played is Black Flag. And that one was very good. Because there were boats. You get to shoot at people with cannons. That one was very good. Very fun. He wasn't real. Scandal involving scholarly fraud. It would be surprising if there was a black samurai. Just knowing the general context of feudal Japan. And Japan still is, to an extent, very xenophobic. But 80% receivers and the ATF and the Supreme Court. We've got some bad news. We've got some bad news. So,
deploying reinforcements.
PP the Fruge just followed.
PP the Fruge. That is a beautiful name, first of all. Thank you. Thank you for the follow. Welcome. Seven of the Supreme Court justices cucked. They did. So, the Supreme Court upheld the ATF's frame or receiver rule. How I learned about it originally was from this USCCA post. So the Supreme Court upheld ATF's ghost gun regulation by a 7-2 vote. So not even a close vote. So unfinished gun parts, like 80% lowers, now count as firearms if they're easy to finish. We'll put that in quotations because there's no like good test that is set out for what easy means. This means you need serial numbers, background checks, and licenses. So, chat, I have before me an 80% AR receiver. This is what they are counting as easy to finish. For those who have not done one of these, like myself, honestly, because this one is not finished. How you finish one of these receivers is you get basically a block to put this in so that you can drill or mill out this big solid chunk of aluminum here so that you have room for your trigger and fire control group. You also need to drill some holes on the side here. And I do have ARs out here because they're easy to show. And so along with drilling out the inside so that you have room for all of that, you also need to drill these 3 holes, which the placement of those holes is rather important. And then if you want to make a fun switch, you drill another hole. But we don't do that because it's illegal. Three holes. Yes, there's 3 holes, chat. You've got the 2 holes for the trigger and fire control group, and then the hole for the safety. We're not drilling the 3rd fire control group hole that makes it full auto. That's not what we're doing. But you could. So, one of the big things that is slightly concerning is easily convertible. So, the Supreme Court has now said that this is easily convertible into this or that. Even though you have to mill out the inside of this and drill out some holes. Seems pretty simple. It's a lot of work. Now, if we compare the amount of work you have to do to this to finish it, and remember, this is easy to convert. To convert an AR lower into an NFA regulated full auto lower, you have to drill one hole. And I don't know if those of you who are counting, drilling one hole, way easier than finishing that. Which means this is theoretically much closer to a NFA felony full auto than this is to a legal firearm. Yeah, this is like a 99% NFA item. Stop giving the ATF ideas. Don't worry. I am sure that the wonderful people at the ATF could figure this out by themselves, and they probably already have. Everyone knows just drilling an extra hole in a lower automatically makes it full auto. Exactly. Exactly. The ATF hasn't done it before, so they wouldn't do it now. Yeah, clearly they would never. So we've got this. So this can easily be thought of as more ATF overreach, which stomps on DIY gun rights, could lead to more control down the road. Simply makes building guns harder and pricier, hitting law-abiding people, not criminals. Do you think the new ATF administration might fight this? No. No, I don't think they will. The problem with this is for most people, it doesn't make building guns harder and pricier, because all they're regulating is manufactured lowers. Manufactured partial lowers that are not finished. So specifically concerning P80 kits, not 80% lowers, but not great. Yeah, so it's all going to be regulated the same way. So anyone who's like, yeah, this is only going to be the Glock lowers that you just have to like shave a bit of material off the top. It's not. It's not. But even if it were, criminals aren't using those very much. Like, do you think a criminal is going to go through the work to do a DIY project and spend a bunch of money to build a gun when they could just go steal one? Like out of a car? Because let's not be mistaken. Let's not be mistaken. Building an 80% firearm of any kind, even if it's just a Glock, it still costs money, because you have to buy the slide, the barrel, all the internals. They could steal your ghost gun. I mean, they could steal this, but it wouldn't do them any good. Because no criminal who's going to steal this is going to complete it. I mean, this is literally right next to it at the moment. And this is a full functioning firearm. You know, it's about a raw aluminum AR. Raw aluminum vibes pretty hard. It is true. Yeah, so ghost guns aren't real. Ghost guns are not real. So if you look at a lot of the reasoning that they use in this court case, they talk about ghost guns and how they're a threat to public safety, and how there's so many more ghost guns used now than there used to be. Which, if you don't look into it, is, at face value, if you don't use your critical thinking skills, is true. There are more ghost guns used in crimes. However, in order to get to that, you have to ignore the fact that they changed the definition for ghost guns. Ghost guns used to be just purely like homemade, like 3D printed, 80%, or like the absolutely just meth fueled abominations. Those were ghost guns. But they changed the definition. They changed it to include guns that had their serial numbers removed. So if I take this gun here and I scratch off the serial number, that's a ghost gun. Even though this was made in a factory, went out of the factory, I legally bought it, it would now be a ghost gun. Now keep in mind, I didn't manufacture this. I put it together out of parts, but I didn't manufacture this. But if I scratched off the serial number, it would be a ghost gun. And so the giant spike in crimes committed with ghost guns is because they added the guns with serial numbers scraped off to the ghost gun definition. Also includes guns predating serial number requirements. Does it? I didn't know that. I didn't know it also included those. So yeah, for those who don't know, there are a lot of guns, particularly if you're looking, a lot of like the pre-serialized like 22s, a lot of the mail order guns back when this was a real country and you could mail guns to your front door. They just didn't have serial numbers at all. Never manufactured with serial numbers. So you can get just a gun. Like a 12 gauge, a 22. If you go back a little further, you can get a lot more. Who robs a bank with a flintlock? Legends. The only scare term dumber than ghost guns is zombie guns. Zombie guns, I don't think that one's caught on yet, thank goodness. Yeah, zombie guns are people trying to ban parts kits. because we all know that criminals are using parts kits manufactured guns. My next Halloween costume should be a ghost gun. That's pretty good. That's pretty good, actually. You've heard of Franken guns? And so Franken guns, I mean, this is kind of a Franken gun. It's a bunch of nearly random parts stuck together. Guns pieced together from different guns. Yeah. Frankengun sounds like something out of Wolfenstein. That'd probably be way cooler. Specifically, different models or styles. Yeah. That's not what a zombie gun is, which makes it dumber than a ghost gun. Yeah, a zombie gun, I mean, the term, as stupid as it is, kind of makes sense. Like a resurrected gun. Which, if we're honest, if we're being honest, chat, it's a stupid term, but it's kind of clever. But we do have the actual, the case. This is from today. It's pretty long. We're not gonna like read through the whole thing, but there are some important parts in it. You just heard a lot of Kali logic for some of the definitions. Yeah. Anything actually change? Or is this just saying the rules from like 2 years ago are now permanent? Yeah. So the outcome of the case is that the ATF frames and receivers rule from like a year and a half, 2 years ago is back in place. So for a while, it was not being enforced thanks to, I forgot which circuit court it was. Or district court? I don't remember. Someone did stuff. I don't remember who it was. And made it so that businesses could continue going about their business until otherwise notified. And now they cannot. So yes, this is the same ATF rule from a while ago. And it is now upheld by the Supreme Court in a 7-2 decision. Which is very disappointing. I at least expected it to be closer. Clown court, absolute jesters. Yeah. This rule definitely doesn't seem like it would pass the tests, the other tests that the Supreme Court has put out, like the Bruin test. but I don't know. I don't know. We gotta deal with it either way. So, the Gun Control Act of 1968, GCA, requires those engaged in importing, manufacturing, or dealing in firearms to obtain federal licenses, keep sales records, conduct background checks, and mark their products with serial numbers. The act defines a firearm to include A, any weapon which will or is designed or may readily be converted to expel a projectile by the action of an explosive, and the frame or receiver of any such weapon. So basically, what the rule did is I did a few things. Some of them are irrelevant. Like it differentiated frame or receiver as frame as being for a handgun, receiver being for a rifle, just irrelevant stuff like that. And it also tried to redefine readily be converted, which is the important part here. Doesn't even pass the tests that it claims it does. Yeah. If you eat the right spicy food, you can expel projectiles. Me too. I would even say that I can expel projectiles by means of explosive. Therefore, I need to be serialized. Maybe with like a barcode. This reminds you of a new amendment for one of California's definitions of ghost guns. It calls out 3D printers and other CNC machines as firearms and firearm accessory manufacturing devices. Rest in peace, all the like hobbyist 3D printers. Need a background check for that trinket printer. The ever-present they are pushing for civil strife as usual. That's your take? Yeah. Makes me wish I'd bought some more 80%, honestly. I've got retroactive FOMO. Like I didn't even want one. I don't care at all. Like I've got my 80% AR lower that I've had for literal years, just as a paperweight. Majestic Potato. When you first heard zombie gun, you thought the Democrats finally heard about parts kits, but no, they define a zombie gun as banned weapons that gun manufacturers have maliciously redesigned to comply with laws, i.e., government bans pistol grips, etc. So model is reintroduced with thumbhole stock. That's not the definition that I've heard for zombie guns. The way I heard zombie guns described was specifically in relation to like gun buybacks. Because there's some gun buybacks where the police departments would basically strip the guns for parts, destroy the receivers, and then sell off the parts. Which would be parts kits. You have to comment on one of the videos saying that if they keep this up, they're going to get an actual count of how many real Americans own guns. They already have that. They already have that. Remember, they have the digitized gun registry. That is a real thing. You can look it up. There's some good videos on that. Not right now, like tomorrow. It also now would require a shop/dealer to card anyone who doesn't look 18 plus to buy a barrel. Oh, the California thing? Why? What are you gonna do with a barrel without a receiver? That's just like any other part of a gun. They're gonna start carding people who try to buy like pistol grips? Well, in California, maybe. Pistol grips are scary, you know. Charging handles, optics. Oh, 2022? Oh, that's way older than I thought it was. I thought it was like a year and a half to 2 years. 2022 is 3 years ago. Man. Man. Time is going by faster than I wanted to. In 2022, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, ATF, adopted a rule interpreting the act to cover weapons parts kits that are, quote, designed to or may readily be converted to expel a projectile, and, quote, partially complete, disassembled, or non-functional frames or receivers. Non-functional frames or receivers? It sounds like parts kits to me. Sounds like parts kits to me, chat. I don't know about you, but a torch cut receiver seems pretty non-functional receiver to me. AR barrel bolt firing pin. Framing hammer goes bang. What part is a frame or receiver? I would imagine the part that the ATF says is the frame or receiver, which is mostly arbitrary, just whatever they decide that day. Before ATF could enforce its rule, gun manufacturers and others filed what they described as a facial challenge under the Administrative Procedures Act, arguing that the GCA cannot be read to reach weapons parts kits or unfinished frames or receivers. The district court agreed and vacated the rule. The Fifth Circuit affirmed, holding that 921A3A categorically does not reach weapons parts kits regardless of completeness or ease of assembly, and that 921A3B reaches only finished frames and receivers. And we gotta get the text for those now, since we're talking about those. Control-Alt-Derez, hello, welcome. You see 921A3A. And 921A3B. I think those are both in the same document and easy to get to. You'd like to point out that it was not a 2A. You are correct. You are correct. It was not a Second Amendment challenge. It was an administrative procedures challenge. So they were challenging it not on the Second Amendment. They were challenging it based purely on, is an administrative agency allowed to change the definition of a gun or of anything? So no Second Amendment direct violation because it's an administrative procedures, but it still didn't pass. Yeah, so 921 A3. So we've got the term firearm means any weapon including starter gun which will or is designed or may readily be converted to expel a projectile by action of explosive, the frame or receiver of such weapon, any firearm muffler or firearm silencer, or any destructive device. Such a term does not include antique firearms. And so we've got A3A, A3B. So any explosives. So chat, don't be making landmines at home, just like in general. Supreme Court did not rule on whether or not it was 2A violation because this case was not asking that question. Yeah, so the Supreme Court did not directly do a Second Amendment violation. Now, indirectly, it upheld a ruling that does violate the Second Amendment. But that is an indirect, not a direct Second Amendment violation. B, any type of weapon other than a shotgun or shotgun shell, which the Attorney General finds is generally recognized as particularly suitable for sporting purposes, by whatever name known, which will or which may be readily converted to expel a projectile by the action of an explosive or other propellant, and which has any barrel or bore of more than 1/2 inch in diameter. So basically, may be readily converted is what we're coming down to for the big part. So can a parts kit, an 80%, be readily converted? And does the administrative agency have the ability to define what that means? And were they correct in doing so? As a Supreme Court, it is absolutely their job to determine the constitutionality, regardless of the specificity of the case. Not to mention it violates that one thing where it's vague, they have to rule against the government. Yeah, so that's... Oh no, what is that? What's that rule called? Oh no. Is that leniency? Of lenity. Rule of lenity? Is that the one? Or is it a different one? Yeah, the rule of lenity requires the court to interpret an ambiguous or unclear statute in the way that is most favorable to the defendant. So, to the population against the government. Yeah, that is the rule of lenity. So, may be readily converted to. Pretty vague. Should apply the rule of lenity. In my personal opinion, as an anime vampire on the internet. So held, the ATF's rule is not facially consistent with GCA. Page 7 through 24. PP7 to 24. Chat, do we read? How long is this? 5 pages, 63 pages. All right. Chat, we don't want to read this whole thing word for word, do we? You're not going to make me do that, right? It's 63 pages. That's like a book. Basically, whoever comes up with long definitions wins in court. Yes. Yeah. Although we definitely should be the opposite. We need quick, concise definitions, easy to understand. Not this big thing. Although I do understand that you do need definitions, but it should be simplified. All that should be legal anyways. Yes, all of this violates the Second Amendment. But unfortunately, that's not what we're talking about right now. It's all a Second Amendment violation, but this was not a Second Amendment case. It was an administrative procedures case, which is gross. Although it would have been super cool if it would have won as an Administrative Procedures Act. Because then the executive branch wouldn't be able to change things willy-nilly and would leave some precedent for Congress having to actually define things better. But they didn't do that. Basically what they want is ban it all. Yes, that is what they're doing. One thing at a time. All right. Syllabus. Chat, it's our course syllabus. You're back in college. Get your syllabus right here. So section 478.11's provisions addressing weapons parts kit are not facially are not facially invalid under 921A3A. This here, your definition of a firearm. They'll never admit it straight up front. Some of them do, and some of them have admitted it straight up front. Except for some reason, people just ignore it. You won't go back? I can't make you? Good. Good. Who is it who's like whose quote is it? That like it's your moral responsibility to break unjust laws. So it's like Benjamin Franklin or something. I'm not giving legal advice. Oh, as in admit it in front of a court? Of course not. Because then they would lose their court case. Oh, talking about college? Yeah, college is a big brainwashing machine that is meant to tell you how to live your life and take your money. All right, that subsection contains 2 requirements. A weapon must be present, and that weapon must be able to expel a projectile by the action of explosive, designed to do so, or susceptible of readily conversion to operate that way. Some weapons parts kits meet that description. For instance, Polymer 80's Buy, Build, Shoot kit, which contains all necessary components to build a semi-automatic pistol, and can be assembled in about 20 minutes using common tools. I've never made one of these. I don't know if it takes 20 minutes. It probably does not, though. I probably could do it in like an hour. But I doubt it takes 20 minutes. Disclaimer, I'm not a lawyer. This is not legal advice, and this is only meant for educational/entertainment purposes. All right, Bible Shoot, which contains all the parts necessary. 20 minutes. 20 minutes, chat. You can build a gun in 20 minutes. That kit qualifies as a weapon because 1, artifact nouns like weapon often describe unfinished objects when their intended function is clear, as with disassembled rifle. If I have a rock and a stick, is that a weapon? Because I can put the rock on a stick and make either a spear or a club. It's a weapon, chat. I mean, you could also just whack someone with a stick. You don't need the rock on there. You just hit him with a stick. Hit him with the rock. It's true. You could dual wield the rock and the stick and hit him with both. 2, the statute treats starter guns as weapons, though they require conversion work. That is an interesting observation. Although I would use it the other way around. I would say that it specifies starter guns aside from easily converted. Because it's not easily converted. If it was easily converted, they wouldn't have to include it as a separate definition. And so the starter gun should, if we're thinking about this logically, since they included that separately, the starter gun should be considered like the line, the border. Like that, converting a starter gun, since they defined it separately, should be considered the minimum amount of work you have to do to be under this definition. If you have to do more work than that, it is not easily convertible. It can be completed that fast with practice. Unfortunately, YouTube deleted all the P80 speedrun videos. The P80 speedrun, any percent. Man, I should have gotten in on that. I'm not a big fan of speedruns, but I think I could get behind that one. South, Massachusetts sufferer, now here. Today we're all suffering. Sue YouTube for destruction of evidence. They probably didn't destroy it, let's be honest. They probably just hid it from everybody. It's definitely still locked in a server somewhere. Three, the statutory text contemplates that some things short of fully operable firearms qualify as weapons. The kit also satisfies the statute's second requirement, as it requires no more time, expertise, or specialized tools to complete than a starter gun, which the statute treats as readily convertible into a functioning firearm. I'm gonna be honest, chat. I don't know how hard it is to convert a starter gun into a working gun. I would imagine that it very much depends on the starter gun. Remember, the ATF does not recognize muskets. That's true. There are some black powder guns that can be very easily converted to shoot actual, like, shotgun shells. A specific flush cutter model from Klein was the meta for P80 speedruns. Ads! We got ads. Well, some of you have ads. While other kits may be so incomplete or cumbersome to assemble that they cannot be fairly described as weapons capable of ready conversion, the facial challenge fails because kits like Polymer 80s clearly qualify. What? Hold on. While other kits may be so incomplete or cumbersome to assemble that they cannot fairly be described as weapons capable of ready conversion, the facial challenge fails because kits like Polymer 80s clearly qualify.
Ma'arkali gifted a tier 1 subscription to South Our.
Ma'arkali! Thank you. Thank you for the gift sub. Very much appreciated. And South, congratulations on your gift sub. So literally, this sentence right here. Kits may be so incomplete or cumbersome to assemble that they cannot be described as capable of ready conversion. They literally say that some kits can't be readily converted, but it doesn't matter because these specifically can be. Excuse me? It's really some California logic. They're going to use this to ban everything. You can't have any kits. Other kits cannot be described as capable of ready conversion. Doesn't matter because these specifically do. It's the stupidest thing I've read in my life. And by demilled, we'll see. We'll see where this goes.
Deploying reinforcements.
Rebel We've just followed.
Rebel Red VT. Thank you for the follow. Welcome. Goal met. We hit the auto goal of 530 followers. Congratulations, everybody. That's the guy you brainwashed into following me? Beautiful. Beautiful. Brainwash all your friends and have them follow me. Welcome, though. We do gun things here. Today, we are discussing the recent Supreme Court decision about frames and receivers. And I said we wouldn't read through the whole 63-page document, but that's exactly what we've been doing so far. So, we'll see. A good kind of brainwashing? Yes, good brainwashing, good. Bad brainwashing like they do in college, not good. You see Pro 2A, you follow? Good. We are very Pro 2A here. So section 478.12c's treatment of partially complete frames and revolvers is also not facially invalid under 921A3B, definition of a firearm. Like weapon, the artifact nouns frame and receiver may describe not yet complete objects. The statute uses these terms to encompass some unfinished items elsewhere, as in 923I's serialization requirements for incomplete weapons, silencers, and destructive devices. Hold on. 923. That's 921. Hold on, we gotta go find 923 now. We're deep dive analyzing this thing. 923I. F G H I. Licensed importers and licensed manufacturers shall identify by means of serial number engraved or cast on receiver or frame of the weapon in such manner as the Attorney General shall by regulations prescribe each firearm imported or manufactured. So just saying that receivers and frames need serial numbers. Got it. What's the current synopsis? Summary so far. Summary so far. They are upholding the ATF's rule on frames and receivers. 80% and ghost guns to include parts kits are not legal. Because of some very strange logic. Every time you say ATF, all you can think of is Waco. Yeah. Many such cases. Waco, Ruby Ridge are the main two for sure. So extending serialization requirements for incomplete weapons, silencers, and destructive devices. Oh boy, I can't wait to buy a serialized receiver that I can't build a gun on. Waco already was in Portal 2? Postal 2? I've not played that one. Maybe I should. Are they the bad guys? If not, there's something wrong. What is it? Waco? There's a Waco shirt from Never Too Young for a Vietnam Flashback. That's a pretty good shirt. That's a pretty good shirt. The sticker is even spicier. Is it too spicy for Twitch and YouTube? There's some flags of the same image out there. Very nice. All right. ATF has, for decades, interpreted the statute to reach some unfinished frames and receivers, and even the plaintiffs concede they have no quarrel with ATF's prior practice of regulating those products. Citations? Which products? I want to know. Accordingly, the statute authorizes ATF to regulate at least some incomplete frames or receivers that take minutes of work with common tools to complete, while other products may be so far from finished that they cannot fairly be described as frames or receivers. The facial challenge fails because the statute plainly reaches some partially complete items. No public transportation. What? What? The plaintiff's arguments about the linguistic differences between subsections A and B and potential unintended consequences under the National Firearms Act are unpersuasive. The government represents that AR-15 receivers do not qualify as machine gun receivers, and this court's analysis of the GCA does not suggest that the ATF has authority to regulate them as such under the NFA. Okay, good. So even though all it takes to convert an AR receiver into an NFA item is the drilling of one hole, they specify it doesn't include that. Although I would argue, if we're going to talk about facial definitions, that would be way easier. A hole? Yeah, your extra hole on your AR receiver. Neither the rule of lenity. We talked about this earlier, the rule of lenity. Neither the rule of lenity nor constitutional avoidance applies where, as here, the statute's text, context, and structure make clear it reaches some weapons parts kits and unfinished frames or receivers. Why? The rule of lenity doesn't apply because of vague text. Huh? The rule of lenity specifically applies to vague text. That's the whole point. You like how chat and me moves on while two people from Northeast have a friendly conversation? Or you want me to eavesdrop on you? I think public transportation is not possible in the United States. It's too spread out. It's not going to work. Public transportation works in places like Europe and Japan because everything is so squished together. That's not how it is in the States. Also, you can't carry guns on public transportation in most places. People look at you funny. We built highways. We can build decent public transportation. Yeah, but if you just use highways, you still can't get to where you're going. You need all the little side roads and stuff. Like when I went to the UK, because I have visited the UK before, there's trains everywhere. And once you get off the train, you got to walk like 3 blocks. And a block is like a quarter mile tops. If there were trains, you get off the train and you got to walk like 8 miles that direction on a side road to get to where you're going. Doesn't work. Doesn't work. Walking in UK roads. How did you derail the current conversation? You talked about public transportation. And reversed and remanded decision. Gorsuch delivered. Roberts, Sotomayor, Kagan, Kavanaugh, Barrett, Jackson joined. Sotomayor, Kavanaugh, Jackson filed concurrent opinions. Thomas, Alito filed dissenting opinions. Good. Need more of these. Justice Gorsuch delivered the opinion of the court. You know about Pam Bondi? I don't know about any of these ones. I do know about them, actually. Not a fan. Oh, this is Justice Gorsuch delivered opinion on Supreme Court. This might be good. This could be good, chat. This is going to be good in a real bad way. For decades, the Gun Control Act has regulated the sale of firearms. This case poses the question whether the Act's long-standing mandates also apply to those who make and sell a new product. Weapons parts kits. A new product? New? New? They're not new. Can we defund and dismantle ATF already? Yes. He meant any product? You're sure of it? I don't know. It says a new product. This is also Gorsuch. Shortly after the assassinations of Senator Kennedy and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. stunned the nation. It's going to be surprising to you, chat. They didn't use ghost guns for those. And they well, it may have not even been civilians doing it if we're gonna jump down that hole. MLK with CIA job, 100%. Off the records, of course. I mean, of course, I definitely trust the government, and I'm sure they would never kill anyone. Of course, clearly. I mean, just because all the evidence makes it look like it was our own government who killed Martin Luther King Jr. I'm sure they would never. Even though the shot that they said killed Martin Luther King Jr. Was literally like impossible at the time because there would have been a tree in the way. But that tree was cut down during the investigation, mysteriously, so that the shot would actually seem possible. But I'm sure that that's irrelevant. If the Fed been printing infinite money, then for sure they got more dark schemes happening. Yes. Standing shot, tree in the way, on a bathtub, in awkward position. I mean, in awkward position. Not a horribly strong argument. If you're a well-trained shooter, you're trained to shoot from various awkward positions, and you're trained to be able to figure out how to deal with being in an awkward position. But yeah, you're definitely not trained to shoot through a tree. Photos show 1 foot on each rim of the bathtub. Ideal shooting position. Now, it's not ideal, but honestly, like in my bathroom, I've got like a tub, and there's like one of those windows. It's like up high above the tub. And so if I stand up on the edge of the tub, I could see out. And I definitely don't like snoop on people looking out my bathroom window. That'd be crazy. But but when I stand like on the tub with a foot on each side, it's not the best. But I could probably take like one accurate shot. I also don't train standing on the bathtub. You don't train to take a shot in every position conceivable? Okay, you don't train in every position conceivable, but you can train to be able to deal with a lot of awkward positions. Is that my local corrupt politician? Walking by outside my bathroom window? All right, back to Gorsuch here. Shortly after the assassinations, Congress adopted the Gun Control Act of 1968. What a mistake that was. Existing gun control measures, Congress found, allowed criminals to acquire largely untraceable guns too easily. Often, for example, criminals could evade state laws regulating in-person sales simply by purchasing guns through the mail. Back when our country was a real country, when you can order guns through the mail. In response, Congress adopted a number of new mandates. As a result, many of those now engaged in importing, manufacturing, or dealing in firearms must obtain federal licenses, keep records of their sales, and conduct background checks before transferring firearms to private buyers. 18 U.S.C. 922T 923A G1A. (923A) G. I don't know. Importer stuff. Bathroom window equals grassy knoll. Third story corner book repository building. Yes. Back when you could buy clothes, a gun, and a house all in one order from Sears. What? Buying a house? Chat, we know that doesn't happen anymore. And Sears still existed. Yeah, the Gun Control Act was the downfall of Sears. It was just a slow burn from there. Are there any other pending cases in SCOTUS? Almost definitely. Although I don't know what they are off the top of my head. Where were we? Congress adopted another. I can't speak anymore. I'm now illiterate, chat. In response, Congress adopted a number of new mandates. As a result, many of those now engaged in importing, manufacturing, or dealing in firearms must obtain federal licenses, keep records of their sales, and conduct background checks before transferring firearms to private buyers. The act also requires importers and manufacturers to mark their firearms with serial numbers. 923I, we looked at that one earlier. These mandates serve at least two ends. The background check requirement seeks to keep guns out of the hands of criminals. Many studies on the case, and it is wildly ineffective at doing so. Abramski v. U.S. The licensing, record-keeping, and serialization requirements, meanwhile, aim to, quote, assist law enforcement authorities in investigating serious crimes, end quote, by permitting them to, quote, determine where, by whom, or when, end quote, a firearm was manufactured and to whom it was, quote, sold or otherwise transferred, end quote. That's awful. In serialization, like gun 000001, like that serial number? Yes. So, I mean, the serial number on here is currently covered up. But so you've got your serial number there. That is the number, the manufacturing number of the gun. And the ATF tracks those, even though they're not supposed to. Today, thousands of law enforcement agencies nationwide depend on the Act's tracing system to link firearms involved in crimes to their owners. The GCA mandates apply to firearms. See Section 922T, 923AI. The law defines that key term broadly. Under 921A3, a firearm includes any weapon, including a starter gun, which will or is designed to or may readily be converted to expel a projectile by action of an explosive. The frame or receiver of any such weapon. Any firearm, muffler, or firearm silencer. That one needs to be taken out immediately. Any destructive device. Thanks to this generous definition, generous to the government, the GCA has long been understood to reach everything from run-of-the-mill rifles to novelty umbrella guns. See Novelty Guns ATF June 5, 2015 at this link. Recent years, however, have witnessed profound changes in how guns are made and sold. When Congress adopted the GCA in 1968, quote, the milling equipment, materials needed, and designs were far too expensive for individuals to make firearms practically or reliably on their own, end quote. With the introduction of new technologies like 3D printing and reinforced polymers, that is no longer true. Today, companies are able to make and sell weapon parts kits that individuals can assemble into functional firearms in their own homes. Generous to BlackRock shareholders? Yeah, whoever is generous to, it is not the civilians. These kits widely vary both in how complete they come and in how much work is required to finish them. At one end of the spectrum, a kit may lack essential parts and require substantial effort, specialized expertise, uncommon equipment, and a significant amount of time, end quote, before anyone can fire a shot. Brief for former acting chief of ATF Firearms Technology Branch, et al. MEC Curie 35. At the other end, some kits, quote, contain all components necessary, end quote, for, quote, a complete pistol, end quote, and can be completed in perhaps half an hour using commonly available tools. Sales of these kits have grown exponentially. Exponentially is in quotes here. Home hobbyists enjoy assembling them. Vanderstock v. Garland. But criminals also find them attractive. That is largely due to how the kits are sold. Some manufacturers and dealers take the position that weapons parts kits do not qualify as firearms subject to the GCA. As a result, they say they are free to sell their products without obtaining a federal license, conducting background checks, maintaining sales records, or marking components with serial numbers. The upshot, quote, police departments around the nation, end quote, have, quote, confronted an explosion of crimes, end quote, involving these, quote, ghost guns. Again, chat. Ghost guns the vast majority of ghost guns used in crimes are not parts or 3D printed guns or kit guns. They are stolen guns with the serial number scratched off, which this ruling does nothing about. See, brief for petitioners 8. In 2017, law enforcement agencies submitted about 1,600 ghost guns to the federal government for tracing. And obviously they couldn't because they had no serial numbers because they were scratched off. By 2021, that number jumped to more than 1,900. Jumped to more than 19,000. Efforts to trace the ownership of these weapons the government presented have no... What? Efforts to trace the ownership of these weapons the government represents have proven almost entirely futile. Also keep in mind that this huge increase is not because of a huge change in the market from 2017 to 2021. It's because they changed the definition of a ghost gun. The definition of a ghost gun used to be a gun without a serial number made at home, like a homemade gun. But they changed it to include any gun, any and all guns without serial numbers, including guns obtained through crime, such as theft and burglary, that had their serial numbers scratched off. Which, I'm gonna let you in on something here. This is a hard concept. Is already illegal. It's already illegal to steal guns from people. That's not allowed. You should buy one of those transparent SL8s. So you can tell everyone it's your ghost gun. There was one of those transparent SL8s on Gunbroker a little bit ago. I don't know if it's still there. Did someone actually use the term upshot in a legal brief? They did. Right here. The upshot, question mark. I do like how conveniently in this giant 19,000 number that was provided, it did not actually include a breakdown of how many of those 19,000 were actually made from these kits. These 80% kits. Didn't include that. Seems like an important bit of information if you're going to use this number that includes both those and a whole slew of other things. Seems important we know how many of those actually apply to the ruling you're making here. That'd be too easy. Of course not. They'd hurt their case. Yeah. They definitely would. The SLA has been there for like 5 years. Oh, hasn't? Apparently I don't look for transparent SL8s enough. Oh. That's awful. That's awful. I hate intellectual dishonesty. Because that's what this is. This number right here is intellectual dishonesty. This 19,000 number that you're saying applies to this case includes, yes, partially things that do apply to the case, but the vast majority of these, this huge number that you just put forward, don't. That is straight up intellectual dishonesty. That's like including suicides in gun violence statistics, which they do, by the way. Like if I'm gonna like take some 12 gauge mouthwash, they would count that as gun violence, which it is, to be fair, a very violent thing, and was done with a gun. But that's not gun violence. A source of 19,000 made it up. So he cited it. He cited where he got the number from. More than half of that could be normal scratched off guns. Oh, I guarantee that at least like 70 to 80% of this is stolen guns with serial numbers scratched off. Like, so the first stat, 1,600 in 2017, to only 4 years later, 19,000. That is more than 1,000% increase. I don't know this for sure. This is unverified information. But I would wager that if you took all of these like ready to build kits that have sold, it would not make up for this disparity here. I don't think there have been 18,000 of those sold and built. I could be wrong. And that's if literally every single one of those went to a criminal to be used in a crime. Real gun violence is the stuff in Chicago's South Side. Yeah, when people are shooting at each other, when people are shooting at another people, that's gun violence. And doing a shotgun kiss in the privacy of your own home, don't get me wrong, very sad, very unfortunate. It's not gun violence, though. B. Oh, we're getting to Gorsuch argument number 2. In 2022, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives adopted a new rule designed to combat the proliferation of ghost guns. Do you know what would combat the proliferation of ghost guns more than banning 80%? This is very simple. You ban files so that people can't remove the serial numbers from their stolen guns. Easy, done. Clearly, once nobody can remove the serial numbers, no more ghost gun crime. Solved. I'm a genius. They should hire me. Moms Demand Action, Giffords. You only have to pay me like $30 an hour. I'll join your team. I've got great ideas. We ban files. The solution would be what? You ban files. You ban files so they can't file off the serial numbers, making it a ghost gun. Because if you steal a gun, you file off the serial number, it's a ghost gun now. So if you ban files, they can't file off the serial number. I just solved it. I solved ghost guns, chat. I'll watch my email. Please send it to my business email. Ban Chisor? Ban hammer and chisel? Sounds like a slur. Moms demand action. I would work for Moms Demand Action if they paid me. I think it'd be very interesting to see how they worked internally. I think we could get a lot of information. I'll be a double agent. Moms Demand Action. You didn't hear that. You can go ahead and send me the application. In doing so, the agency invoked authority Congress granted to prescribe, quote, rules and regulations as necessary to carry out the GCA. Two provisions in the agency's new rule are of special relevance here. The first addresses weapon parts kits directly. Recall that 921A3 extends the GCA's mandates to firearms. A term subsection A defines as, quote, any weapon, including a starter gun, which will or is designed or may be readily converted to expel a projectile by the action of an explosive, end quote. In its new rule, ATF interpreted this language to embrace weapons parts kits that, quote, are designed or may readily be completed, assembled, restored, or otherwise converted to expel a projectile by action of an explosive, end quote. Those who make or sell kits that satisfy this test, the ATF said, must comply with the GCA by securing federal licenses, conducting background checks, keeping sales records, and marking their products with serial numbers. To decide whether a kit, quote, may be readily converted, end quote, into a working gun, the ATF added it will consider several factors, including time, ease, expertise, and equipment required to complete a weapon, as well as the availability of other necessary parts. The application is from Spelman University. What is Spelman University? So non-serialized normal guns from an FFL would be a solution? That would be like normal 1776 times? I mean, you can currently buy actual ghost guns from an FFL. If you get like one of those like old 22s, an old shotgun or something with no serial number, because not all guns used to have serial numbers. There's a lot of guns out there that don't have serial numbers, and you can just go buy them. Does this mean a demilled gun is now a parts kit? We will see how far the ATF runs with this Supreme Court decision. I bet they're going to try to run really far. It means a solid block of aluminum is now a gun. Yes, there are. For those who have not seen, for those who don't know. You can buy from 80% arms. Hey, 10%, just give your email. You can buy from 80% a 0% billet AR-15 lower receiver. This right here is a lower receiver, chat. It says so. It's marketed as an AR-15 lower receiver. You just need a little bit of easy to acquire tooling. And this is yours. Is it legal in Massachusetts? Probably not. No shipping outside of the USA. Under California law, this product contains an unserialized firearm precursor part and cannot be sold to the state of California. Chat. I know it's a meme, but they literally cannot sell this chunk, this block of like cut and not machined aluminum to California. No aluminum for California. Although I'm sure you could go buy some 4.5 by 1.5 inch aluminum bar stock in California. You could probably get like 8 feet of it. And then you can make 12 0% billet AR-15 lower receivers out of it. $70? No thanks. Yeah. It's a little expensive. It is more expensive than a 20%. Slightly cheaper than an 80%. This is very similar to the one I have. This might be the one I have. No, mine has different milling marks. Oh, bulk. You can buy bulk. 79.99% when? Who knows? Who knows? Yeah, so for those who don't know, you can buy a 0% billet AR-15 lower receiver. All right, where were we in here? We're going to go here. In its new rule, the ATF interpreted this language to embrace weapons parts kits that, quote, are designed to or may be rarely completed, assembled, restored, or otherwise converted to expel a projectile by action of an explosive, end quote. Those who make or sell kits that satisfy this test, the ATF said, must comply with the GCA by securing federal licenses, conducting background checks, keeping sales records, and marking their products with serial numbers. To decide whether a kit, quote, may readily be converted, end quote, to a working gun, the ATF added, it will consider several factors, including the time, ease, expertise, and equivalent equipment required to complete a weapon, as well as the availability of other necessary parts. Remember that ATF gave the outgoing director an 80% lower as a retirement gag gift and openly joked about it being an untraceable gun that requires no background check, despite actively pushing to make possession of the same a felony for the public. Yes, this is true. Yeah, so for those who don't know, previous ATF director Dettelbach, when he retired, at his retirement ceremony thing, they gave him an item that they were actively lobbying to make illegal. So keep in mind, the ATF, when they gave this to him, believed that this should be an illegal item. Imagine the director of the CIA retiring, and as a retirement gift, they give him a kilo of cocaine. It's crazy. Rules for thee and not for me. Make the ATF director have a felony. It would be ironic. But even though I don't like the guy, I don't think anybody should have a felony for having an 80% receiver without a background check. And that does unfortunately include ATF Director Dettelbach. It would be funny. It would be hilarious. I'm not denying that the irony would be palpable. And I would have a lot of fun with it. Crazy anti-freedom laws, yeah. You just look at all of these ones. Just the GCA. GCA, NFA, all of it. I'll scrap it. Throw it all out. The second relevant aspect of the agency's new rule concerns a key building block of almost any firearm: its frame or receiver. Under subsection B of 921A3, quote, the frame or receiver of any such weapon, end quote, covered by the subsection A, is treated itself as a firearm. Effectively, that means a frame or receiver is, even when sold separately, subject to the Act's requirements. Also, keep in mind that the designation of frame or receiver as to like which part it is on the gun, almost entirely arbitrary. So like on ARs, it's the lower. Sometimes. You can find early ARs with a serialized upper, because the ATF changed their mind. And so there are some historical ARs out there with serialized uppers, because they decided that was going to be the receiver. But also, if you look at some other designs, if you look at, I actually have a very good example right here. So if you look at the Keltec RDB, if there was any part of this that was going to be a receiver, if I was designating Matilda
Matilda _ DearTuber just
welcome.
rated with 7 viewers.
And welcome raiders. Hello. Hello, I am the X-Count. We talked about guns and stuff. Today specifically, we are diving into the Supreme Court decision on 80% lower receivers. Is this ATF or FBI? We are currently dealing in ATF territory. There's a deer in my yard. Honey, get the musket. We got a deer in the yard. Oh no, good or bad ruling? It is not a pro Second Amendment ruling. So the ruling in Bondi v. Vanderstock is 7-2, favoring the ATF ruling. Which is rough. And like, yes, it's not a Second Amendment specific case. They were trying to attack it based on Administrative Procedures Act grounds. But even in their decision, they said the rule of lenity, for those who don't know, aside here, the rule of lenity says that any ambiguous law should be determined in favor of the people or against the government. They basically took the rule of lenity, they talked about it, and they were like, yeah, but that doesn't apply here because we said so. You still have a feeling that they all been bought by the big Israel folk? Nah, I think they're just stupid. Oh. But currently, we're talking about the definitions of frames and receivers. So ARs, it's the lower on any modern AR. There are some historical ARs that have serialized uppers because the ATF changed their mind. The Celtic RDB, fantastic example of arbitrary part used for serial number designation. So chat, there's a hair on here. So chat, if I was the ATF, if I was designating a serialized part on the RDB, the lower here, big long piece, got all your fire control group in it, holds the magazine, your bolt rides on top of it. It would make sense for the lower to be the receiver, the serialized component. However, the serialized component on this thing is this bent piece of sheet metal, this dust cover going across the top. This piece right here. This is the serialized part on the RDB. Because who knows why? Consistency, we can't have that here. On the RFB, the lower is the receiver. That makes sense. That's slightly consistent. But not with Celtic's other designs. This bent piece of sheet metal, I could make that in my garage with a hammer. No specialized tools required, not even a drill. Wild. Crazy. The top is receiver? Yeah, the top. This bent sheet metal dust cover is the receiver. This is the serialized part. You can see the serial number right there. That's where it is. Not this big lower. Has a trigger, fire control group, all that stuff. This bent sheet metal up here. Good job, ATF. and the P50, the upper is the receiver. That's true. On the P50, the upper is also the receiver. The P50, big space blaster, Keltec GAT 5.7. Cool, weird gun. Oh, Matilda. Sorry, I was a little busy ranting about ATF receivers. Welcome, welcome Matilda. Welcome Raiders. Playing Fallout 4. Was it good? Were you winning? Did you kill some Fallout 4 enemies? Makes sense. Hammer and barrel are on the upper. And in the P50, I mean, in basically any gun, the barrel will be in the upper. But the P50, the hammer is in the upper. SNT is making a low receiver for the P50. And you want one? S&T P50 or what? S&T? S&T motive? Huh? The Dawn. Might be because of, as a time, they're designing maybe... oh, excuse me. And maybe because as of time, they're designing maybe some type of ban, something coming, and it never happened. We make thousands of those parts easily. Like I said before, the ban took effect. S and T, not SNT. All right, what is this? What is this other article? We're going on a tangent here real quick. ATF transferring hundreds of agents to FBI. That'll make my Form 1s go faster, I'm sure. 1972. Abolish it. It's been around for 53 years too long. March 26th. That is yesterday, or today, for those who have not slept yet. The word on the street is that the big changes at the BATFE will continue. According to CNN, very reliable news source, hundreds of ATF agents are about to be transferred over to the FBI instead. The mainstream media report, there have been rumors of ATF agents shifting to FBI, or perhaps seeing the whole agency rolled into the FBI for weeks now. I don't like that. I don't want the ATF to have better funding. For weeks now, ever since the election of President Trump. Now, CNN is reporting that this is indeed going to happen, as per a story initially published March 22, 2025. FBI Director Kash Patel, who also serves as acting director of the BATFE, has outlined plans to move as many as 1,000 ATF agents to the FBI, cutting ATF agents by more than a third. 3 people briefed on a plan told CNN. The move is expected to begin with the reassignment of a couple hundred ATF agents to border-related criminal enforcement. Okay, that kind of makes sense. As FBI agents, one person briefed on the matter. Read the whole thing here, no thanks. Note that it's all unnamed sources in that story, but it seems unlikely this is made up, as it is following a general pattern that we've seen since the change in the White House. That is true. We have seen a lot of confidential information leaks since the change in the White House. With a little over 2,500 agents currently working at the ATF, this move would be a huge impact on the agency, as about 40% of them would be transferred over to the FBI. It is also possible the remainder would be reassigned to other federal law enforcement agencies. Previous ATF Big Boss Stephen Dettelbach stepped down from his role in January. Currently, Kash Patel is serving as acting director. See TFB's commentary on what that means here. Now, as for the transferred ATF agents, take note that the FBI itself is transferring hundreds of agents away from DC headquarters to offices around the country. ATF agents are joining an agency that itself is in a period of transition. Hopefully it all crumbles. Your reaction to this info? If they don't roll ATF into the FBI, yippee. If they do merge agencies, boo. Yeah, I don't want the ATF better funded. I want the ATF to struggle to have funding to trample on my rights. I don't want them to have more funding to do it. You thought it got denied? As in it was fake? I don't know. This is published today? So don't know. Don't know. It's possible it's not real. But it would make sense since the same guy is head of both ATF and FBI. The problem is they can't completely dissolve the ATF without Congress. Because Congress put it there, so Congress has to take it away. The source is CNN, so yeah, that is true. So a whole bunch of ifs and maybes here. But I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it. Very mixed feelings. I would much rather go to legal battles against the ATF than the FBI. I hope that is a common consensus. Fighting a legal battle against the FBI is way harder because they have so much more funding. And if we're going to be, as a Second Amendment community, fighting Second Amendment cases, I would rather they go against the ATF. It's not the agency itself, it's the people with the money. The people with money aren't changing. So I would rather have the less funded agency. And the people with the money is the FBI. They're even more likely to disappear you than the ATF. That's true. If the ATF disappears you, you at least go down as a martyr for the Second Amendment. See Ruby Ridge, Waco. If the FBI disappears you, then it's like you never existed. I don't know about you, chat. But if something horrible were to happen, and I got disappeared, people better tell my story. The people with money is the deep state. You have a lot of faith in people's tight lips for the deep state to exist. Sure, they can dissolve it. Keep it around in name only. Its headquarters can be a broom closet at FBI, and sole employee is the janitor who mans the closet. I mean, there are certain enforcement things that Congress gave ATF the power to do. But yeah, they definitely could decrease its size. For sure. Now we're calling hopping off. Go to sleep. All right. Good night. Sleep well. All right. So where were we? Frame, key building block, frame or receiver. Under subsection B of 921A3, the frame or receiver of any such weapon covered by subsection A is treated itself as firearm. Effectively, that means a frame or receiver is, even when sold separately, subject to the Act's requirements. Presumably, Congress singled out these components for special treatment because of the special role they play in constructing firearms. As the government put in 1968, a frame or receiver is, quote, that part which provides housing for the hammer, bolt, or breech block and firing mechanism, which is usually threaded at its forward position to receive the barrel, end quote. By this definition, no part of an AR is a receiver, because no part of an AR houses all of these. So in an AR, the lower houses hammer, bolt, and part of the firing mechanism. Excuse me, not the bolt. Hammer, part of the firing mechanism. The upper contains bolt, breech, part of firing mechanism, and threaded for barrel. You think that was or, not and? So that part which provides housing for a hammer, bolt, or breech block, and firing mechanism, and usually threaded to receive barrel. It's a mix of ors and ands. So we've got and firing mechanism. So for sure has to contain firing mechanism. The RFB, that little folded piece of metal on the top, doesn't contain the firing mechanism. On an AR, fire control group is part of the lower. The whole firing mechanism, not entirely part of the lower, part of it's in the upper. The hammer is contained in the upper of the RDB. Is it? I'm gonna be honest, it's been a long time since I've taken the RDB apart. I've not shot this gun in so long. I've not shot this gun in so long, it doesn't even have an optic on it anymore. I retired the optic off of it. I'm gonna be honest. I don't know where the hammer is in it. I thought it was on the lower. It would make sense for it to be on the lower because the serialized part, literally a bent piece of sheet metal. It contains nothing. So I don't know exactly where the hammer is in this. I'll have to take it apart at some point. Figure that out. I guess we have YouTube. We have YouTube.
Do kind of a field strip, and
Field strip.
with these push pins, you can pull it even harder, and it'll pull. So you pull these guys.
Okay, handguard off.
This is
There is lower.
the bottom piece is where your trigger mechanism, your extractor. You know, there's where your magazine goes. There's where the ejection port is for the rounds, and then you've got the barrel and the gas system right here.
That right there, this is the serialized part. This is a dust cover on the top that he just pulled off.
So here's your, trying to do this around the camera is kind of complicated, but this is your, that's your bolt.
Disassemble RDB. Rejected. Rejected. We're not disassembling an RDB right now.
There you go. And that's your barrel. So if you ever want to take this and rotate it around, you just have to do that. It becomes a
ambidextrous
charging handle. So those are the main components of this gun. Obviously, the serialized component for this rifle is actually this piece right here, believe it or not. So they've decided that you can't use this gun unless you have this piece, so they serialized it.
This piece is literally a dust cover. It's like a folded over metal dust cover. What this piece contains is a cheek pad and a stock.
On my gun, on this gun, I had a problem with the extractor on the bolt face coming off.
Waiting for him to show internal. He puts it back together. Oh, where's that the X-ray? I need the I need the X-ray firing of the RDB. I don't think there is one. At least I can't find it quickly for the RDB. There must be one somewhere. You think there's nothing? Are you wrong? In the in that folded over dust cover. Let's see, Holm, did I skip?
Anyway.
Did I skip too far?
Round.
So he shows, oh. So in this upper, this dust cover, I mean, you can kind of see like where the stuff sits in it.
So this is the bottom piece. This is where your trigger mechanism, your extractor, you know, there's where your magazine goes. There's where
It's so blurry.
Ejection port is for the rounds. And then you've got the barrel and the gas system right here.
See, I mean, you can kind of see up there. Like there's nothing in there. Yeah, this part is a bent plate. Like if you could put the pins through and not have to use these holes, it would function.
So here's your, trying to do this around the camera is kind of complicated, but this is your,
And oh, here we can see.
that's
So-
your bolt.
So you can't see like where the hammer is here, but you can see there's the firing pin. So there's the back of the firing pin. If there was something in the receiver, it would be coming down from the top. But it can't because this rod is in the way. You take yours apart and take a picture of the hammer. The hammer is down here. I guarantee the hammer's down here. If I'm not, if I'm somehow wrong,
This gun, unless you have this piece, so they
then
stay serialized.
then I don't know. Show me the inside of that. Not blurry,
This
please.
Is
I'm gonna be honest, chat. I don't know which part's the hammer.
bottom piece is where your trigger mechanism, your extractor, you know, there's where your magazine goes. There's where the
Looks like it should have. Yeah, this
ejection
part down
port
here,
is
I
for
feel
the
like
round.
should have been the receiver. But here we are. All right. All right, fine. You win, chat. You win. We're taking apart the RDB. Oh, too far. Okay, we're taking them all out. Except that one. Oh, I need to take out that front pin too, don't I? Do I? I'm not taking off the handguard. Or is that also holding other stuff on? It's been so long since I've taken this thing apart, chat. Come on. Come apart. Okay, maybe I do have to take out the front pin. Handguard. Oh yeah, the handguard was holding it on. Okay. Oh, I forgot to take out the rear pin. Whoop. Okay, so Oh, I did not clear enough space for this. This thing is so long and awkward. Okay, so dust cover. Serialized. There's nothing in here. This is empty. Like, it's the only thing in here is a buffer at the back. This contains nothing. Like, this doesn't even have rails that this rides on. Like well, can I put this together without the dust cover? Oh no, I guess you do need it because you need the back of this. You need the back of this against something. So if you just put a piece of like something back here to hold that, then it would work. Where hammer? The hammer. Which piece is the hammer? Was that no? I'm gonna be honest, chat. I don't know which piece is the hammer. I don't want to dry fire it without the upper on. But I also don't want to break anything. Which piece is the hammer in this? Oh, that's the hammer. This is the hammer right here, chat. This is the hammer back here. Hold on. Zoom. That's the hammer. It is a very long hammer. So click, goes forward. Oh, it's very stiff. You thought that was the ejector? It is multi-purpose. But when you pull the trigger, zoom out just a little bit. So pull trigger, nothing moves except this piece. There you go, chat. Interesting swing direction. It is very interesting. And I have to put this back together. Can I just slide this in? This doesn't seem like it's going to work. We're going to try it anyways. Nope, that's not going to work. Go together. Oh, this gun is so long and awkward. Now I remember why I don't take it apart very much. It's just so weird. Go together. Why would you do this to me, chat? What are you even hitting? You're not running into anything. Do I just have to push harder? Bruh. Go together. Please. Huh. Oh. This is not a wonderfully disassembling weapon. Oh, we got it though. This may as well be a serialized component on this thing. There you go. You got your ASMR. It wasn't in ASMR mode, but that'll be that's got to be good enough for you. You just got ASMR struggling. ASMR still struggling. What is not lined up? Why is this pin not going in? Ah! Go together. Okay, well, that pin's most... Where did my last pin go? It's running away. Oh. Why is this pin... There we go. Success. Time that. Speedrun. Speedrun, Keltec, reassembly, any percent. There you go. Definitive proof. Serialized part contains a buffer. And that's it. Everything is awful. Why would you make me take that apart, Chad? Bring back the cursed pistol AR. And now we know it's only plate. I told you it was only plate. You didn't believe me. I also forgot that this giant thing back here was the hammer. Yeah, Keltec receiver. Literally bent plate. Could make that in your garage. With no specialty tooling. Make that with a hammer and a ruler. And I guess a punch for these holes. All right. Effectively, back to the Gorsuch ruling. Effectively, that means a frame or receiver is, even while sold separately, subject to the Act's requirement. Presumably, Congress singled out these components for special treatment because of the special role they play in constructing firearms. That's putting a lot of faith in Congress's knowledge of guns. So before I say this, keep in mind, I'm not advocating for what I'm about to say. But in most countries, the regulated parts of firearms are the pressure-bearing components, because those are the parts that it is hard to manufacture. A special role in constructing firearms. Receivers are super simple. I mean, every part on a firearm is a special role in the firearm. So I guess it's not technically wrong. Every part has a special role. But the arbitrarily designated receivers and don't provide any more special of a role than the barrel. As the government put in 1968, a frame or receiver is, quote, that part which provides housing for the hammer, bolt, breech, block, firing mechanism, and which is usually threaded in its forward position to receive the barrel. Unless it's the Keltec RDB, which has none of those. You can see a future to get replacement springs being only at FFL. I mean, if you want to get like baffles for a suppressor, those are regulated. The baffles. A benign part, useless by itself. You can't just buy suppressor baffles. In its 2022 rule, ATF sought to expand this definition. Now, the agency said a, quote, frame or receiver, subject to Section B of 921A3, should be understood to encompass as well a, quote, partially complete disassembled or non-functional frame or receiver, including a frame or receiver parts kit that is designed to or may readily be completed, assembled, restored, or otherwise converted to function as a frame or receiver. Still, the ATF stressed the Act and its new rule have their limits. They do not apply until an object has, quote, reached a stage of manufacture where it is clearly identifiable as an unfinished component part of a weapon. So, for example, a forging, casting, printing, extrusion, unmachined body, or similar article does not count. A forging, casting, printing, extrusion, unmachined body, or similar article does not count. What? An unmachined body. So This is a machined body. A 0% receiver, unmachined. This is machined. I guess maybe if this didn't have like magwell, bolt catch slot, mag release, all these holes cut out, then it might be unmachined. Like if it was just purely the profile with no holes whatsoever in it, then it might be unmachined. I don't know, there's no definitions here for unmachined. Or is unmachined purely just bar stock? How long is this opinion? Okay, we're almost there. C of Gorsuch opinion. Before ATF's new rule took effect and ATF could begin efforts to enforce its new rule, various gun manufacturers, at-home gunsmiths, and others filed what they described as a facial challenge under Administrative Procedures Act. They argued that the GCA cannot be fairly read to reach weapons parts or unfinished frames or receivers. As a result, the plaintiffs contended the ATF regulations in 478.11 and section 478.12c, purporting to extend the GCA's mandates to these products, could not be enforced against anyone and had to be set aside as impermissibly issued in, quote, excess of statutory authority. Makes sense to me. At summary judgment, the district court agreed with the plaintiffs and vacated the agency's new rule. Vanderstock v. Garland, 68. Okay, that's. I'm not reading that whole thing. Citation. I'm not reading the citation. On appeal, the Fifth Circuit largely affirmed. The court acknowledged that subsection A of 921A3 authorizes ATF to regulate weapons that, quote, may readily be converted to expel a projectile by the action of an explosive, end quote. But the court reasoned that language does not reach weapon parts kits, nor does it matter how complete a kit may come or how easily it may be assembled. As a categorical matter, the court held the act reaches none of them. The Fifth Circuit offered a similar assessment when it came to unfinished frames and receivers. Subsection B of section 922A3 permits the agency to regulate, quote, the frame or receiver of any such weapon, end quote, covered by subsection A. But the court held those terms do not speak to, and thus do not allow the agency to regulate unfinished frames and receivers, no matter how close to completion they may be. For those reasons, the Court of Appeals concluded that provisions in ATF's new rules addressing weapon parts kits and unfinished frames and receivers were facially inconsistent with GCA and thus had to be set aside, consistent with the Administrative Procedures Act. The government sought review in this court. Our intervention was necessary, the government insisted, because the Court of Appeals had, quote, adopted an interpretation of the act that would effectively nullify its central provisions, end quote. What, nullify its central provisions? They literally said that the ATF could still regulate firearms. It just said they couldn't regulate firearms that were not firearms because they were incomplete. And leaves criminals today nearly as free to obtain untraceable firearms as they were before the Act's adoption in 1968. Yeah, they're exactly as free to obtain untraceable firearms because they can literally still steal them. Because that's still how unserialized guns are made. They're stolen and the serial numbers are filed off. And guess what? That was illegal before and after 1968 and is still illegal. Chat, did you know it's illegal to steal guns? Unbelievable. All right. Where is... I don't want to read this whole thing. I just want to see Thomas's dissent. Here we are. Thomas J. dissenting. We have skipped to page 33. Justice Thomas, dissenting. The government asked this court, just last term, to rewrite statutory text so it could regulate semi-automatic weapons and machine guns. Semi-automatic weapons as machine guns. We declined to do so. The government now asks us to rewrite statutory text so that it can regulate weapons parts kits. This time, the court obliges. I would not. The statutory terms frame and receiver do not cover the unfinished frames and receivers contained in weapons parts kits. And weapons parts kits themselves do not meet the statutory definition of firearm. That should end the case. The majority instead blesses the government's overreach based on a series of errors regarding both the standard of review and the interpretation of the statute. I respectfully dissent. What an absolute giga Chad. I wish I could call people stupid and sound this eloquent. That's beautiful. Man, what a beautiful life skill that Justice Thomas has. In 1934, Congress enacted the National Firearms Act, NFA, the first federal statute to regulate firearms industry. The first federal statute to regulate the firearms industry. Congress enacted this statute, quote, to provide for the taxation of manufacturers, importers, dealers in certain firearms and machine guns. Oh, that sentence is so long. Hold on. Why'd they make that sentence so long? This is a 5-line sentence. Oh my goodness. Congress enacted this statute to provide for the I can't talk anymore, chat. I'm tripping over my tongue. I've got a third left leg. Or however that goes. I don't know the saying. Something like that. Except it's in my mouth. Congress enacted this statute to, quote, provide for the taxation of manufacturers, importers, and dealers in certain firearms and machine guns, to tax the sale or other disposal of such weapons, and to restrict importation and regulate interstate transportation thereof. Sounds like that violates the Second Amendment. Taxing a Second Amendment right? The NFA defined firearm narrowly. The term covered only certain short-barreled shotguns or rifles, machine guns, and silencers or mufflers. Congress broadened that definition 4 years later through the Federal Firearms Act of 1938, defining firearm to include, quote, any weapon designed to expel a projectile or projectiles by action of an explosive, or any parts or parts of such weapon. With minor adjustments, not relevant here, that definition endured for about 30 years. You think we need to do a little tree watering? Yeah, I've got some trees that are looking a little dry. They're no longer producing as much fruit as they should. Which is too bad, because I really love fruit trees. In 1968, Congress replaced the FFA with the Gun Control Act. The GCA, which remains in effect today, is the principal federal law regulating the commercial firearm market. It requires manufacturers and dealers of firearms to have a federal license and, in most cases, to conduct background checks, maintain records, and apply serial numbers to their firearms. The GCA also imposes criminal sanctions for a variety of well-known firearm offenses, prohibiting large swaths of people from shipping, transporting, possessing, or receiving a firearm, providing a sentencing enhancement for persons who carry a firearm during crimes of violence or drug trafficking crimes. The GCA sets forth a narrower definition of firearm than the FFA did. Its definition, which governs all of Chapter 44 firearms, states that a firearm is A. Any weapon, including a starter gun, which will or is designed to or may readily be converted to expel a projectile by action of an explosive. B. The frame or receiver of any such weapon. C. Any firearm, muffler, or firearm silencer. Or D. Any destructive device. Such term does not include an antique firearm. Whereas the FFA had treated, quote, any part or parts, unquote, of a firearm as a regulable fire... What? Whereas the FFA had treated any part or parts of a firearm as a regulable firearm, the GCA deems only a firearm's frame or receiver to be the firearm parts that qualify as a firearm in their own right. Congress left the terms frame and receiver undefined. Shortly after the GCA's enactment, the Bureau of ATF... Oh wait, this is not the ATF that we know. Shortly after the GCA's enactment, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Tax Division promulgated a regulation defining frame or receiver as, quote, that part of a firearm which provides the housing for the hammer, bolt, or breech block and firing mechanism, which is usually threaded at its forward position to receive a barrel. Oh, I didn't know that that definition wasn't provided by Congress. That was a ruling from the Alcohol, Tobacco, Tax Division. No wonder it makes so little sense. That regulatory definition made sense, unless you look at how it's applied. At the time of the GCA's enactment, the term frame was generally understood to mean, quote, the basic structure and principal component of a firearm. And the term receiver was generally understood to mean, quote, part of a gun that houses the breech action and firing mechanism, end quote. Thus, ATF's initial definition of frame or receiver accorded with the term's ordinary meanings, see 33 Fed Reg 18558, that part of the firearm which provides housing for the hammer, bolt, or breech block, and firing mechanism. ATF's definition also aligned with the GCA, because for any weapon to, quote, expel a projectile by the action of an explosive, end quote, the weapon must have both a mechanism that will initiate the explosion and a way to seal the firing chamber. In other words, the weapon must have a frame or receiver. Thus, by defining frame or receiver as the parts of a gun that provide housing for the hammer, bolt, or breech block and firing mechanism, ATF's initial definition fit neatly into the statutory scheme. This understanding of frame and receiver governed for over 50 years. But ATF recently changed course in an effort to regulate so-called ghost guns, i.e., privately made firearms built from kits or collections of unfinished parts, to tackle what it perceived to be the, quote, homeland security threat posed by the wide availability of ghost guns. The agency promulgated a rule redefining firearm, frame, and receiver. A definition of frame or receiver and identification of firearms, 87 Fed Reg 24652, etc., without any change to the statute. This rule expanded the regulatory definition of firearm to include a, quote, weapons parts kit that is designed or may readily be completed, assembled, restored, or otherwise converted to expel a projectile by the action of an explosive, end quote. This is beautiful writing. And I've lost my spot. Where were we? By the action of an explosive. It also broadened the definition of frame or receiver to include, quote, a partially complete, disassembled, or non-functional frame or receiver, including a frame or receiver parts kit that is designed to or may readily be completed, assembled, restored, or otherwise converted to a function as frame or receiver. One of the rule's critical innovations is the manner in which it allows ATF to determine whether an object is, quote, clearly identifiable and thus regulable as an unfinished frame or receiver. Quote, when issuing a classification, the director may consider any associated templates, jigs, molds, equipments, tools, instructions, guides, or marketing materials that are sold, distributed, or possessed with the item or kit, or otherwise made available by the seller or distributor of the item or kit to the purchaser or recipient of the item or kit, end quote. It's a lot of things to consider. Prior to this rule, ATF did not examine templates, jigs, or other items and materials in determining whether partially complete frames or receivers were firearms under the GCA. Instead, ATF looked to the object itself to determine whether it was sufficiently complete to constitute a regulable firearm or receiver. 2004 guidance letter from ATF explaining that the agency, quote, evaluates the level of completion of the submitted sample and makes a comparison with the sample of a completed firearm of the same type. The new definition, however, expanded the meaning of frame and receiver to incorporate items entirely separate from the object itself. According to the ATF, whenever an unusable, unfinished piece of metal constitutes a regulable frame or receiver, can turn on a manufacturer's marketing materials. Looking at marketing. I think I remember something about Daniel Defense and marketing recently. Or maybe not so recently anymore. ATF offered one meager limit on its broad new definitions. Under the rule, raw material, such as an unformed block of metal or liquid polymer, will not constitute a regulable frame or receiver. All right, so basically, anything more than the 0% billet AR lower or actual 3D printing material is not a frame. Before the rule took effect, a group of individuals and manufacturers of weapons parts kits filed a petition for review challenging the rule's new definition of frame or receiver and firearm. As relevant here, the plaintiffs alleged that the rule exceeded ATF's statutory jurisdiction, authority, or limitations. Under the Administrative Procedure Act, APA, see amended petition for judicial review of agency action and request for declaratory judgment and injunctive relief in citation. Alleging rules' expansive definitions provided ATF, quote, new additional authority in excess of what is proposed, considered, debated, or passed by Congress, end quote. The district court granted summary judgment to the plaintiffs and vacated the rule. The Fifth Circuit affirmed in relevant part. It held that ATF's redefinition of frame or receiver was an, quote, impermissible extension of the statutory text, end quote, and that the agency's attempt to redefine firearm to include weapons parts kits stretched the statute's words too far. The government's efforts to, quote, justify its unprecedented expansion of the GCA, end quote, the court explained, collapses upon a cursory reading of the text. True. Man, they can read. Critical thinking applied. Not in the Supreme Court this time. Judge Oldham wrote separately to highlight the staggering implication of ATF's new position, particularly with respect to the AR-15, the most popular rifle in America. Observing that the rule regulates frames and receivers according to what they might become rather than what they are, and that an AR-15's semi-automatic receiver can readily be converted into a fully automatic receiver with relative ease, he concluded that, on ATF's logic, the government may regulate AR-15s as machine guns. If ATF were correct, Judge Oldham cautioned, quote, then millions and millions of Americans would be felons in waiting. Who is Judge Oldham? And where do I pat this man on the back? What a legend. Actually looking at what it could become, looking at the precedent that this could set. Crazy. Imagine. This court granted certiorari to decide two questions: whether the rule's new definition for frames and receivers fits within the statutory definition of frame or receiver under the GCA, and whether the statutory term firearm can cover weapons parts kits. Before turning to the questions presented, a threshold issue is the applicable legal standard for analyzing the plaintiff's APA challenge. Applying traditional principles of statutory interpretation, the Fifth Circuit asked whether the rule, quote, conflicts with the plain language of the GCA, or, quote, casts a wider net than Congress intended. We took this case to determine whether the Fifth Circuit was correct to answer yes. I would undertake the same inquiry as the Fifth Circuit and ask only whether the rule contravenes clear statutory text or otherwise exceeds the GCA's legislatively imposed limits on agency authority. I love Clarence Thomas's writing, but oh my goodness, I need to raise my IQ by a few points. I need to go to law school. Reading books helps? No. I'm a VTuber. I'm illiterate, chat. The majority takes a different approach, asserting that the plaintiffs conceded to having brought a facial challenge. The court takes this characterization as given and analyzes the challenge as a facial attack. In particular, the court assumes arguendo that the regulatory definitions are valid so long as they cover at least some weapons parts kits. This approach superficially appears to apply a framework similar to that of US v. Salerno. I'm not familiar with that case. There, the court explained that to prevail in a facial challenge to a statute, the challenger must establish that, quote, no set of circumstances exists under which the act would be valid. So in US v. Salerno, so a facial challenge has to establish no circumstances under which the act is valid. So as long as you can prove one circumstance, then it would be valid under US v. Salerno for a facial challenge. But he's arguing that it's not a facial challenge, right? This approach seems plainly inept in a challenge to This approach seems plainly inept in a challenge to regulatory definition. Quote, to define is to settle, or to establish or prescribe authoritatively. Goodness sakes, how long is this citation? See also. The point of defining a term in a regulation is therefore to show what the law permits and what it prohibits. But a regulatory definition that is accurate in only a single valid application cannot possibly explain explicitly, fix or establish, or set forth the meaning of the statutory term. Yeah, that makes sense. You can't use a broad brush on everything because it works on one thing. You can't use a broad brush as a fine tip marker. Consider a hypothetical statute that defines motorcycle as a motor-powered two-wheeled vehicle with pedals. If a regulatory definition copied the same language and then added that the term shall include any motorized vehicle, the regulatory definition obviously would be wrong. Not every motorized vehicle is a motorcycle, and the fact that some motorized vehicles happen to be motor-powered, two-wheeled vehicles with pedals does not suggest otherwise. It is difficult to see how an overbroad regulatory definition becomes defensible simply because some set of circumstances exists in which the regulatory definition overlaps with the statutory definition. I like that a lot. I like that a lot. You can't redefine a motorcycle as a motorized vehicle just because some motorized vehicles are motorcycles. But apparently, according to the test they use, because this works for something, it works for everything. So according to the logic of this case, if we apply that to motorcycles, like Justice Thomas did, you can define motorcycles as any motorized vehicle because it works for one thing. Crazy. Crazy. Treating challenges to regulatory definitions as facial challenges has substantial implications. If a regulatory definition survives APA challenge, so long as just one item it covers also happens to be covered by that statute it purports to interpret, it is difficult to understand how an agency would ever promulgate an invalid definition, so long as it imparts the definitions Congress laid out in the statute. The agency can sweep in whatever additional conduct it wishes. No matter how far the agency expands its regulatory definition, the statutory definition inevitably will capture at least some of it. To its credit, the majority attempts to confine the effects of its approach to the facts of the case. Because the majority assumes the relevant legal standard without deciding it, it refrains from mandating this framework. Rather, it rests on the conclusion that the plaintiffs essentially conceded that the facial challenge standard applies. And it takes the application of that standard as given for this case only. That is good. It is good that it is this case only, but accepting this only definition could be pretty bad. We believe the better course is to leave further analysis of the proper tests for another day and address the parties' dispute as they have chosen to frame it. So long as lower courts do not equate an APA challenge with a facial one, they are free to disregard the majority's analysis and hold that the rule exceeds ATF's statutory authority. I like that a lot. This sentence right here lets the other courts disregard this ruling, as long as it's not a facial challenge, which this one shouldn't have been. Facial means? So facial, not the facial we're talking about here is not the X-rated kind of facial. So what it means here in the courts is basically you apply this to only this one situation. And if it applies to this one situation, it's fine. The problem is that this shouldn't have been, does this work in one specific situation? It should have been, is this a rule that can be applied broadly and still be within the definitions Congress set forward? So they're judging a broad brush by how well it colors one small square. So let's see if we can explain that a little better. So think of a color by numbers book. How you've got all the little different squares and shapes with little numbers in them for different colors. A facial argument says, okay, this square right here, this square should be brown, and we're going to argue over whether or not this space should be brown. The problem is that what they're arguing over here, this ruling, isn't a marker to color in this one square brown. They're judging a paint roller they're just going to roll over the whole coloring book with, based on whether or not it can color this piece brown. And so yes, it can color this piece brown. But that's not what they should be arguing here. They should be arguing, can this be applied broadly, or does it exceed the scope of the definitions that Congress put forward? Does that make sense? Did I explain that well? I think that was okay. It works really well in my head, at least. Kind of. All right, kind of. We'll go with is good enough for now. You Googled it, kind of helps. Okay, as long as we got there somehow. As for the questions presented, start with the question whether the rule's new definition for frames and receivers can stand. Ordinary principles of statutory interpretation make plain that the rule sweeps too far. The terms frame and receiver in section 921A3B do not cover, quote, partially complete, disassembled, or non-functional frames or receivers, end quote. The majority reaches a different conclusion based on several interpretive errors. Most notably, the major proceeds under the faulty premise that our standard rules of statutory interpretation do not apply to a word for a thing created by humans. In statutory interpretations disputes, a court's proper starting point lies in a careful examination of the ordinary meaning and structure of the law itself. As relevant here, section 922A3 defines firearm to include any weapon, including a starter gun, which will or is designed to or may readily be converted to expel a projectile by the action of an explosive, and the frame or receiver of any such weapon. Because the GCA defines neither frame nor receiver, we are given each term at its ordinary meaning. The parties agree that in 1968, the terms frame and receiver were understood to refer to the basic structure and principal components of a firearm, and the part of a gun that houses the breech action and firing mechanism. But ATF's rule conflicts with this accepted meaning in at least two ways. First, it defines frame or receiver to include objects that are not frames or receivers, but may be converted to them in the future. Second, it permits ATF to deem an object a frame or receiver based on marketing materials and other materials merely associated with it. The ordinary meaning of frame or receiver does not include objects that may be converted into frame or receivers. As the government itself admits, the word convert means to change into another form, substance, or state or product, transform, transmute. If an object can become a frame or receiver only after it is changed into another form, substance, state, or product, it is difficult to understand how the object can be considered a frame or receiver even before the change occurs. As the Fifth Circuit puts it, a part cannot be both not yet a receiver and a receiver at the same time. The structure of section 921A3 confirms that objects that are not yet frames or receivers do not meet the statutory definition of frame or receiver. Subsection A of section 921A3 covers weapons are not yet functional guns, but that may be readily converted into them. And the statute makes clear that subsection C, mufflers and silencers, and D, destructive weapons, also cover more than finished operable products. See section 921A25, defining muffler and silencer to include, quote, any combination of parts for use in assembling such objects. Section 921A4C, defining destructive device to include, quote, any combination of parts for converting any device into any destructive device described in the statute and, quote, from which a destructive device may be readily assembled. In contrast, subsection B covers only a weapon's frame or receiver. That was a lot of information all at once entering my brain. That took a second to process. When Congress includes particular language in one section of a statute, but omits it in another section of the same act, it is generally presumed that Congress acts intentionally and purposely in the disparate inclusion of or exclusion. This principle holds particular force here, where Congress applied broadening language to the subject matter of every subsection in 921A3 except for subsection B. Yet in defining frame and receiver to include objects that, quote, may readily be completed, assembled, restored, or otherwise converted into function as a frame or receiver, the rule transplants the readily be converted and assembled concepts from section A, C, and D into subsection B, the very provision from which Congress omitted them. The straightforward reading of section 921A3 is the correct one. Subsection B's omission of the readily converted and readily assembled concepts mean that a frame or receiver does not include objects that are not yet frames or receivers. And until promulgating the rule, ATF agreed with this understanding. Big quote. Very long quote. Importantly, the designed to and readily be converted languages are only present in the first clause of the statutory definition. Therefore, an unfinished frame or receiver does not meet the statutory definition of firearm simply because it is designed to or can readily be converted to a frame or receiver. Instead, a device is a firearm either 1. Because it is a frame or receiver, or 2. It is a device that is designed to or can readily be converted into a device that it expels a projectile by action of an explosive. Memorandum of Law in Syracuse v. ATF, 2021. ATF was right the first time. Tellingly, ATF's new interpretation seems to invite staggering consequences. The NFA defines machine gun as, quote, any weapon which shoots automatically more than one shot without manual reloading by a single function of the trigger, end quote, and includes in that definition the frame or receiver of any such weapon. ATF has defined frame or receiver in the NFA to, quote, have the same meaning as in section 478.12, the provision that defines those terms under the GCA. And although an unmodified AR-15 is a semi-automatic weapon, quote, every single AR-15 can be converted into a machine gun using cheap, flimsy pieces of metal, including coat hangers. Oldham. Man, Oldham? Fifth Circuit? I've never heard of this man before now. He's wonderful. Van Dyke and Oldham, big fan. If an object already is what it may be converted into, then semi-automatic AR-15s would seem to be partially complete automatic machine guns. This reasoning exposes the manufacturers, sellers, and owners of AR-15s to criminal liability under the NFA. But Congress does not, quote, hide elephants in mouse holes, end quote. Whitman v. American Trucking Associations. An interpretive approach that would allow ATF to regulate the most popular semi-automatic rifle in America under a statute addressing automatic machine guns should give us pause. Quote, time and again, this court has prudently avoided reading incongruous breadth into opaque language in criminal statutes. The rule's definition of frame or receiver also contravene ordinary meaning by allowing ATF to classify objects as frames or receivers based on criteria other than the object's physical characteristics. Under the rule, any tools, instruction guides, or marketing materials that are made available by the seller can convert an unregulated piece of metal into a regulated frame or receiver. Put another way, the mere presence of things distinct from the object at issue can somehow transform the character of the object itself. Yeah, common use means jack all here. Wait, chat, that's the one I have. Look at that. Look at that. You see that one there in the picture from Justice Clarence Thomas? Look at that. That's the one I have. That's this one. I should get it signed. Do you think that Justice Thomas would sign my 80% lower? I think he would. Didn't Justice Clarence vote against this? He did. We are reading Clarence Thomas's dissent right now. So this is Justice Thomas's dissent that we're going through right now. So that's why this section is so much more based than the first one and Gorsuch opinion. Thomas and Alley, the only real ones, it's true. Everyone else is doing something, and it's not good. The rule's definitions of frame and receiver also contravene ordinary meanings by allowing ATF to classify objects as frames or receivers based on criteria other than the object's physical characteristics. Under the rule, any tools, instructions, guides, or marketing materials that are made available by the seller can convert an unregulated piece of metal into a regulated frame or receiver. Put another way, the mere presence of things distinct from the object at issue can somehow transform the character of the object itself. We already read that, but that's okay. It was a good paragraph. I realized, like, right in the middle that we'd already read that. Good paragraph. Complete with picture. Not a firearm. Firearm. I have the not a firearm because I don't have drill bits sitting next to it. Oh, you guys can't see. Not a firearm. Firearm. I don't have any drill bits close to me. Otherwise, I would put some drill bits next to this, and now it's a firearm. Figure 1 illustrates the rule in action. Both images in Figure 1 depict unfinished receivers. Both lack machining and indexing in the key areas. The only difference is the presence of a jig and drill bits. Yet, according to the rule, these extraneous items make an unfinished receiver a regulable firearm. The presence of items such as jigs or marketing materials that are not, and never could be, a part of the frame or receiver has no bearing on whether a piece of metal or plastic constitutes the basic structure and principal component of a firearm. Because those extrinsic items have no impact on the ordinary meanings of frame or receiver, the regulatory definition exceeds statutory text by using items to expand the scope of those statutory terms. That makes way too much logic, way too much sense. The majority leaves the issue of extrinsic objects for another day, deeming the issues irrelevant under its questionable facial challenge standard. The majority thus defends only the rule's coverage of items that may become frames or receivers. To do so, it substitutes novel linguistic labels for traditional statutory interpretation, mistakes outlier definitions for exemplars, and improperly imports attributes of one provision into another. The majority's statutory analysis deviates dramatically from the careful examination of the ordinary meaning and structure of the law itself, that is typically at the core of this court's interpretive approach. Drawing heavily from an amicus brief at an academic paper, the majority asserts that the terms frame and receiver in subsection B are artifact nouns. That is, they are words for things created by humans. The majority argues that this type of noun is flexible enough to encompass unfinished objects. It explains that, in casual conversation, one might refer to an artifact noun, such as an unfinished manuscript, as a novel, or an unassembled piece of furniture from IKEA as a table. Thus, the majority argues a frame or receiver may sometimes describe a not yet complete frame or receiver. That is horrible logic. Like, yeah, you can say, I just bought a table from IKEA, but the table is still unassembled in a box. But if you use that same language to the use of an object, like if you like, let's come sit down at my table, and then we go and we sit next to a box of an unbuilt table, that doesn't make any sense at all. That is a horrible. That is a goodness sakes. That is some horrible mental gymnastics right there. It is beside the point whether, in casual conversation, some people might use, quote, a word for a thing created by humans, end quote, to discuss unfinished versions of that thing. Quote, in statutory drafting, where precision is both important and expected, the sort of colloquial usage in which the majority relies is not customary. Allison Engine Co. v. U.S. We have expressly presumed that Congress does not draft its laws with the informality of casual conversation. That's true. I don't know if anyone has read laws, but they do not read like casual conversation. A better analogy would be an IKEA table that lacks any screw holes and thus can't be assembled. That's true. I think probably an even more accurate analogy would be like buying table legs and calling that a table. Because we're just talking about the receiver. It's not even the whole firearm. Like if you go out and you buy some table legs, untapped, and calling it a table. You still need other parts. And the parts that you have can't even be used yet. Thus, we must evaluate the rule's redefinition of frame and receiver based on the GCA's entire statutory scheme, not the stereotypical conversational background on which the majority relies. That scheme, as reflected in the GCA's text, context, and structure, confirms that unfinished objects in a weapons parts kit do not meet Section 921A3B's terms. Dressing up colloquial usage with the artifact noun label cannot override this conclusion. The majority further argues that because Section 923I uses the phrase frame or receiver to reach some unfinished and unconventional frames and receivers, such as the frame or receiver of a muffler or silencer, it is reasonable to interpret Section 921A3B to also cover unusual frames or receivers. The majority's conclusion does not follow its premise. Ads! We get ads. We get ads, chat. This is almost a 4-hour stream. Chat. I need to go through legal documents more often. Holy. Probably not, but I don't know, I find it interesting. I don't know if other people do. Section 921A3C defines a firearm to include any firearm muffler or silencer. Section 923I requires licensed importers and manufacturers to place a serial number on a firearm's receiver or frame. To reconcile 921A3C with Section 923I's requirement, mufflers and silencers must have a receiver or frame, even though they do not as a matter of ordinary meaning. Thus, by regulation, ATF deems a muffler or silencer's outer tube or modular piece to be its frame or receiver. In the context of mufflers and silencers, the terms frame and receiver have context-specific meanings that cannot be generalized to other provisions in Chapter 44. As ATF explained, quote, under the GCA, licensed manufacturers and importers must identify the frame or receiver of each firearm, including a firearm muffler or silencer, with a serial number in accordance with regulations. Calling a outer tube or modular piece of a muffler or silencer a frame or receiver thus may be justified as an attempt to square 923I with Congress's discretion to include mufflers and silencers within the definition of firearm under Section 921A3C. But the presumption of a consistent usage is particularly defeasible by context, and there is no reason to think that the agency's workaround for applying 923I to mufflers and silencers should alter the ordinary meanings of frame and receiver in other statutory provisions that do not implicate the same problem. In this case, the statutory scheme makes clear that Section 921A3B frame or receiver language does not include unfinished, inoperable objects, even if one day they might become frames or receivers. The majority further asserts that reading subsection B in light of subsection A actually undermines the plaintiff's opposition. Again, subsection A covers any weapon which may readily be converted into a functional gun. Subsection B specifies that a firearm includes the frame or receiver of any such weapon. According to the majority, that reference in subsection B implicitly incorporates subsection A's readily converted language. And because subsection A covers starter guns and disassembled rifles that are not yet fit for effective use in combat, the majority argues that subsection B should also cover objects that are not yet usable. That conclusion does not follow. The frames and receivers referred to in subsection B are components of the weapons referred to in subsection A. While the majority is correct that subsection A's readily converted language covers weapons not fit for effective use in combat, there is no reason to think that the readily converted language in subsection A applies to the component parts described in subsection B, and every reason to think they do not. ATF recognized as much just a few years ago, explaining that the designed to and readily converted language are only present in the first clause of the statutory definition. Therefore, an unfinished frame or receiver does not meet statutory definition of firearm simply because it is designed to or can readily be converted into a frame or receiver. The majority's examples of starter guns and disassembled rifles underscore the point that an inoperable weapon does not imply an inoperable frame or receiver. While neither type of weapon is fit for effective use in combat, their frames and receivers are typically operable. Quote, "We do not lightly assume that Congress has omitted from its adopted text requirements that it nonetheless intends to apply, and our reluctance is even greater when Congress has shown elsewhere in the same statute that it knows how to make such a requirement manifest." JAMA v. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, 2005. Rather than import language from one provision, subsection A, into another that conspicuously omits that language, subsection B, the court should acknowledge that, naturally read, subsection B is not broadened by language omitted from it, but included in the more expansive text of subsection A. Makes a lot of sense. Makes sense. It's a lot of words. My brain is dying, chat. It's over. It's over. How much longer is his opinion? Oh my goodness. Part 5? 1, 2, 3, 4. We've got 5 pages. Do we keep reading 5 pages? Or do we end? Oh, it's 2. It's 2 in the morning, chat. It is 2 in the morning. I don't think we can read 5 more pages. As beautiful as Justice Thomas and his writing is, I don't think we can read 5 more pages of it today. We will read his closing paragraph. Congress could have authorized ATF to regulate any part of a firearm or any object readily convertible into one, but it did not. I would adhere to the words Congress enacted. Employing its novel artifact-noun methodology, the majority charts a different course that invites unforeseeable consequences and offers no limiting principle. I respectfully dissent. Beautiful. Oh, also, previous section, I would apply the rule of lenity here. So, section 5 talks about the rule of lenity, which I also think that the rule of lenity should apply. But for now, I have been reading for so long. Very long Supreme Court case. I didn't even read half of it. Honestly, I might read it like in my free time. Is there like a PDF to audio reader? That'd be nice. So I can like listen to it while I'm doing stuff. But for now we will be raiding out. Who do we raid today? Chat, who do we raid? Who do we raid today? Thanks for stream. You are welcome.
Deploying reinforcements.
Got dumped user shit myself just followed.
Got dumped because I just shat myself. Thank you. Thank you for the follow. Welcome. We just finished up reading some Supreme Court opinions. Very exciting stuff for sure. But we will be raiding out. Who do we raid into after reading Supreme Court decisions? Thanks for the fire stream. You're welcome. You're welcome. And I'm not sure how fire it was, but it was there for sure. So you know what? Let's raid into Leaflet today. So we're going to raid Leaflet because I don't know anyone else who may at all be interested in literally reading Supreme Court opinions. Leaf gun streams are hit and miss. Yeah, Leaf does gun streams every now and then. But Leaf is much more in the variety category. She's currently doing some tabletop stuff. But we are going to raid out. We're going to raid Leaf. So, thank you everyone for stopping by today. We should make a raid message. I don't know what raid messages to do. I'm not creative, chat. We have the default raid message. '80s lowers loss. There we go. Is that good? There we go. Everyone, grab the raid message real fast. I will see you all tomorrow.